Underpass. All right, guys, so next to me, I have a 2016 McLaren 570S with the new McLaren Artura arriving just next year, replacing the 570S. How does this car hold up around 5 years later? This came out as the baby entry-level McLaren, and it packs about 562 horsepower and does have a V8, twin-turbo V8. The Artura will have a V6, which is not the most attractive thing to some people. And so, how does this stack up? And how worth it is this car at $160,000 range? We're gonna find out, so let's go for a drive. Starting off in sport mode, you get 562 horsepower. That's a speed I should not repeat on camera, but 0 to 60 happens in 3.1 seconds. 443 foot-pounds of torque. Top speed is 204 miles an hour. That is not a good noise. 7-speed dual clutch transmission. Of course, it has a new monocell carbon fiber tub. Monocell 2, as they called it, and it's about 3 inches lower than the 650S, which just makes getting in and out that much easier. It says 562 horsepower, but these have been dynoed to be making that to the wheels. So McLaren, for whatever reason, tend to kind of underrate their cars. We even got the carbon paddles from the McLaren P1, which is just very nice because the 12-seat paddles were just kind of a little small. Traditional McLaren fashion, it is on a sort of rocker panel, so you can upshift and downshift just using one hand. Push the downshift paddle, it will upshift for me. So it allows you to really use this car every day in any kind of scenario. On the phone call, whatever it is, you can just drive with one hand. So just small things like that are very nice. And this car might not be able to tell from the inside, but it does have an aftermarket exhaust. It sounds nuts from the outside. Even a stock 570S exhaust sounds really good, I think. Not as good as a 458, of course, but that's, or even a 488, that's a tough feat. Ferrari's just had that sound nailed for decades. I mean, it's hard. People like to compare the 12-seat with this car price-wise. This is about $20,000, $30,000 more on average, but it is a better car, I think. It's a bit more reliable, and I think the interior is better laid out. I think it sounds better. I do want to put it in track mode though. So to do anything with this car, you have to press active first. You have normal, sport, and track for your performance and your handling. Let's put that over to track. Oh, buddy. Yeah. Shifts are noticeably punchier. You do put it into track mode, the speedometer changes and becomes much more aggressive, much more track oriented. Your gear select is enlarged. Steering gets a bit tighter. So this is no longer hydraulically connected suspension. It is traditional roll bars and just your normal sports car type of feel to it. Right off the bat, compared to the 650 and 720S, it just feels that much more analog. You can kind of feel everything moving around beneath you just a bit more, not in a sort of unsettling way, but just a sports car way. Everything is connected in a traditional way. Because of that, it does ride nice, but it doesn't have that sort of Mercedes S-Class cloud-like ride that the 650S has. The steering, I will say, is fantastic in this car. Still has hydraulic power steering. Everybody else now is pretty much electric power steering, and that gives them a huge advantage when it comes to overall experience and road feel. It's still an immensely fast car. Brakes, that I can tell you, it doesn't get old. Not as terrifying of an acceleration as the 650S. It's a much more predictable power band. It still has some, I don't want to say crazy lag, but it still has some of that turbo lag where it definitely kicks in pretty hard. But the way it comes on, the way the power is delivered is more linear than in a 650S. This does have 285 rear section tires, actually quite skinny tires for the type of car, but it just allows you to be a bit more playful with that back end, having skinnier tires. And I mean, it still has plenty of grip. I mean, don't get it twisted. Because of that carbon tub, I mean, handling is still phenomenal. With the new Artura coming out next year, that's going to be a V6. And I have heard it. Sounds good for a V6, I mean, of course, but it's no V8. You could say that the steering, in a way, kind of makes up for the lack of Ferrari noise. Underpass. And the way you pick up speed is so effortless that you just, I'm not going to say how fast you're going right now, but it just feels like you're going much slower. When you downshift between 3,000 and 4,500, it really kind of pops on the upshift. That is not boring. That sounded like a Star Wars gunship. People were kind of thinking it was a little bit ludicrous. They were calling this a sports car, not a supercar. I mean, it's faster than a 458. Faster than a Huracan. It's a supercar. It's a full-out supercar. It just has some sports car elements to it. Yeah, steering is so good on this car. And not as darty as in a Ferrari, but I actually prefer that. It's quite heavy steering. And I like that it doesn't dart in so quickly, because I think Ferrari steering tends to be a bit too quick for my liking, at least. 0 to 60 is whatever. There's plenty of cars that are faster than this, but it's really after 60 miles an hour when McLarens tend to just shine. Yeah, after 4,500 it really starts the build. I'll say it again, it's not a terrifying speed. Like the 720S is almost borderline psychotically fast. Like, it is just hypercar speed. That is fun, but also terrifying. This is still very fast, and it can get you in a lot of trouble, but it's more manageable. And the brakes are also tremendous. Good pedal feel, which is kind of hard to nail with ceramic brakes that tend to have kind of iffy sensitivity to the pedal. But these are great. To think this is an entry-level car that is faster than a 458 and not too far out from a 488 is pretty crazy. It really just comes alive. After 60, 70 miles an hour, it just keeps climbing, and there's no sign of slowing down. The whole point of this car is to have a little bit less grip, a bit less of that hyperspace feel that you get in the other McLarens and the Super Series models, and it's just a bit more driver involvement. And because of that, it is more fun on the road, I would say. It has a bit more personality to it. Even without the hydraulic suspension, it still rides better than most of its competitors, which is very impressive. Downshifts are very satisfying, the way they kind of just spike up. The interior is very well thought out. Coming from the 12C and the 650S, let's just say 650S, it's a much, I think, better designed interior. It is a bit tighter inside, I would say, overall, but it's quite satisfying the way it's laid out and the way it's been executed. Do you have your Bowers & Wilkins sound system? It's actually a 12-speaker, I think 1,200 watt sound system. So I mean, in a cabin this small, it really sounds good. I also like just the simple steering wheel. No buttons on it, no turn signals. It's just a simple wheel. McLaren hasn't switched over to what Ferrari and Lambo have done with putting everything on the steering wheel, and it makes it a bit cluttered, in my opinion. And I just like the simple kind of back to basics steering wheel. I also do have a little shelf behind you as well, which is nice just to want to add some bags or some duffel bags, groceries, whatever it is. The front trunk is also a decent size. You can drive this every day, which is the case with pretty much all the modern exotics. You can drive them every day. This can just be your only car and you'd be fine. And what is crazy is that this is the entry-level McLaren, or came out as the entry-level McLaren, and it is just as fast as the legendary McLaren F1 from 20 plus years ago. In terms of acceleration, of course, top speed, that dominates everything else still. But in terms of acceleration, this is just as fast as the F1, which is insane for an entry-level McLaren. I think it's a very good looking car as well. I think it looks much better than the 650S and the 12C. 570S was a very nice departure from the older cars. It was a new look, new taillights, which look like sort of the McLaren logo. Nice rear diffuser, aggressive headlights as well. Though it's the baby McLaren, is actually a couple of inches longer and wider than the 650S. Overall, I think it's a very nice looking car. Proportions are right, and you can't open the engine bay, unfortunately, but they at least do give you some mesh so you can kind of look at that V8. Many of these cars have no issues. I mean, they can have issues, McLarens do. 12C is kind of the one you want to be a little wary of. In this car now, for $150,000 plus range, it's pretty crazy performance. I mean, just like the 12C was as well, but this is a more reliable and just a better overall package, I would say, than a 12C. And overall enjoyment factor, this dominates the Turbo S. I also love how McLaren isn't really too mainstream yet. I mean, they're getting there, but like, you know, in terms of pop culture, you don't really hear much about McLaren. You just hear about, you know, Lamborghini, Ferrari. Just, yeah, that's all you know. Still an amazing car, and 5 years is not that long. Like, that's not a very long time, but really, actually, in the car world, it kind of can be. Everything is moving so fast now. It's hard to keep up, but I think the 570S is still, and always kind of has been, an amazing bargain. In the real world, this is a fantastic car. You know, of course, the Artura will start off much more expensive than a used 570 now. There's no question the Artura will have better performance than the 570S. I'm sure it's incredible on the track and even just, again, and speed-wise, it's probably amazing, but it's going to have a V6. It's going to kind of lose that element of personality that McLaren is already struggling to kind of capture. But I do think the 570 has really captured it best. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.